So I always liken that little bit to the piano accordion, that little segment from the scherzo. This is vk3sl, and pleased to have made it back on by the skin of my teeth. Actually, I was involved in a project. I was working on stuff and then looked at the clock, and lo and behold, the active flow of the situation meant that, I was completely behind schedule. And a little bit frustrated because I almost had something working. I've been working on the Studer 807A. It's A807 it is. It's a most beautiful machine. Mechanically, they're just like nothing in this world. It's the last, or one of the later of the Studer lines, and a couple of them here have landed on the doorstep and very badly water damaged. So I've been trying to sort out problems, and after a lot of careful bringing power up and cleaning circuit boards and putting them back together, it worked, and it worked really well, and I couldn't believe it. My jaw hit the ground. Then I took it outside, gave it a cosmetic clean-up, thinking, well, this is ready for the shack, and of course, bring it back inside, and no. Yes, no audio. Oh, it's just unfortunate. So something's amiss. I don't know what it is. In fact, the audio is completely dead, so I reckon it's a power supply issue. A fuse, maybe. There's a lot of fuses inside. But mechanically, it's working really well, so that's a good sign. So yeah, it's a slow process. It's a step-by-step process, and we'll get there. But I can't wait. If I can have a Studer 807, I can start dubbing off all these 10-inch wheels I got under the house, and that would be a really good thing. Because I don't have a machine, for a 2-track machine for 10-inch reels. Well, I do. I've got a Revox A77 under the bench here, but it's not in the best condition, and the Studer would be a better unit. So it's work in progress. Hopefully we'll get there soon. But what a day. I've been at the coalface for most of the morning, and some of the listeners will be aware that I've been involved in the dissemination and sorting of a large collection. Now I was going to check. I'm getting some texts here.
Yes, you'll be getting some SIG reports from Mr. W.
Yeah, there we go. I'll just check in and find out. Yeah, I haven't calibrated things yet. White noise. And power's down. Oh, gosh. Can't have that. There we go. White noise in the background system. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm using the... What am I using?
You're about 45/9 here on whatever power level you're running.
Okay, sure.
I've noticed a couple of crackles on your signal occasionally where it jumps up to a higher level and then back. So I don't know if there's a little mittened connection.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we had a lot of problems last night. It was quite ridiculous. It ended up consuming about half the first section of the program, and I had guests, and it was all a bit ridiculous. That was when we moved back to the TS2000 for VHF. Now, unfortunately, it involves...
I probably would have used this thing.
Yeah, look, I probably should have. I just hadn't done that before, but it would only put out 10 watts, and I don't know how that would be at distance, whereas the TS2000 puts it...
would go pretty well. In fact, I'd almost say you'd get more distance out of it on 2 than 70 because of the band is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, look, it's worth a try. It's probably where I'll end up going, but the problem is that I've got to recalibrate all of the signal process, the audio processing, and it's a bit of a process. And I've got all the stats written down, and I know what to do, but somehow it involves. It's complicated to explain, but the TS2000 is a lot more sensitive, so I've got to have levels right down on a couple of things. So they're sort of let down at their minimum, and you know how with a potentiometer at the very minimum setting you get...
it's quite difficult to set accurately because the minuscule excursions are big jumps in value.
Absolutely.
Unless you've got a linear taper pot, and they're fairly rare.
They are. And one way around it is I've got some stud faders here, or some attenuators, and with resistors, I typically have one of those in series for the other system, but not this one. So it's all a bit. It just requires a nut out, and I've got to sort it properly so we don't have this ongoing problem. But I'll just up the power. Now, am I over DV now? How's that sound to you? Is that...
Just gives a bit more level.
Hello, test 1 2 1 2 3 4 5.
Yeah, I think you could come back a little bit.
I could come back.
Just a bit of furriness on it.
Yeah, okay, there we go. Maybe that's a bit better. Does that sound okay, or maybe a bit more, do you think?
Yeah, down a little more.
Okay, I'll turn it down on the compressor.
Oh, no, split the difference.
Okay.
Or did you go off mic?
Yeah, I went off mic then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So how's that now? 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, all right. I think that's a happy medium. Well, let's work with this for the time being, and I'll need to write down the stats again and set up things properly for VHF. But it's all ever since I put this new system in, this interim system with the 7100, that I haven't quite got a handle on it.
I mean, the good thing about the 7100 is I assumed that all you would need to do is toggle your main and subband.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would TX on 2, and all the rest should remain the same.
Yes, it would.
Because it's a common processing and all of that.
Mm.
And all that would happen is that 2 becomes your main TX band as you are now, and 70 would become then your RX band into it.
Yeah, the only other thing is that I've got the triplexer in, and I've got
no difference.
Well, oh, okay.
That's just all that is, isn't it? All that is. So when you say the triplexer, that's feeding. So have you got? How's that?
So the
feed?
triplexer has got VHF and 23 going into the TS2000, and I've taken out the UHF lead to go into the 7100.
Okay, so all you need to do then is the same. Is now the 7100. Does that have a single antenna input? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, you can't at the moment. What we need to do.
Yep.
The easiest way to do that is provide you with a duplexer. So you feed the 2 and 70 leads out of the triplexer back into the duplexer, which recombine them, and then feed that as a single feed into the 7100.
Sure.
And that means you can still use the 2000s and RX TX on 23.
Yeah, that'd be good. Well, I'll need to find. I just need to get down to it and sort things out and make it all compliant and in sync with itself. And then we won't have problems like last night. That was all a bit unfortunate. Next week, I've got Jamie and Frank here live for a face-to-face missions on Friday night. So I want to resolve it properly before then and see if I can make it all stable at least. But look, all I really need to do is just make up another attenuator box. I've got heaps of stud faders and just a interfacing transformer. I use a step-down transformer actually as well. And then that's what I presently use with the other system, with the 7100. I just need to make up another box to use with the TS2000. I'll probably be absolutely fine. It's just that I'm working.
Again, I'd probably watch using that given its state, and if there's commonality on the PA between 2 and 70, it's you want to be very careful with. I'd be using the 7100 as your TX. I mean, at worst, you could just bring the 2 metre. Unplug the 70 antenna and plug the 2 metre.
Well, that's the thought.
And just use it like that.
Yes, that's the thought.
And then use the 2000s as an RX for 70.
Yeah.
I mean, that would work okay as well. But there is a way to recombine so that you can just use the...
Okay.
Does the 71 allow you to have both bands up at once?
Don't think so.
Okay. It's one band at a time.
Yes, I think it's one band at a time. It's a pretty basic unit. It's just a little car thing.
I'm kind of aware of them. It's just I've never owned one, so I'm not familiar with the operating system.
It's very small, and it's actually not running hot now because I've got the fan on it. And so it's okay when you've got proper cooling, and it seems to hold up reasonably well. But I can't really run it at full power. Really, I think 10 watts would be the most.
No,
sensible.
And I wouldn't either because these things are none of the amateur gear is rated for 100% TX duty cycle.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. So anyhow, look, I've just got to think of a way forward and see if I can. Just sort out that problem because it was frustrating last night because I had the guests here and here I was fishing around, and thanks to Wayne for giving me signal reports. It's not so easy because without an SDR for UHF, it's and I can monitor here. I can monitor here on a handheld, and I do that just to sort of sense if I'm distorting really badly or whatever, or overdriving. It sort of gives me a very broad benchmark, but I can't hear anything fine or any. I can't,
further afield, like far field monitoring kind of thing.
That's it, and that's the great advantage of SDRs, of course, is they offer you this amazing resource. So 160 is brilliant. I can really listen far afield, and there are several monitoring prospects there. So that's the way it is. But anyhow, thanks for that thought. Yeah, if we can recombine, that could be the one way to go about things. But
And you should check your text. I think you get a bit more info has just come in. But
okay,
and
sure.
just as an aside, I picked up, I sussed out those preamps you were talking about from the Big J.
Yeah.
So I went and they're very low in stock. Looks like they're discontinuing them.
Oh, really?
So I went and picked up a few today. So it's good. So I have some now. So we can.
Okay.
make a few up.
So you actually got some today, did you say? Oh, well done. Oh, fantastic. That's
They're
really
the
good.
ones, they're based on the old silicon chip 94
Yes,
article, is it?
it is indeed, and it's got little jumpers to so you can change the EQ. You can use a Blum line. You can basically make any EQ curve you like.
Yeah, they show you there's three different
There's three
variations that they provide componentry for and diagrams for, but obviously you can tweak from there.
You can tweak from there, and I find it's good just to do the preamp for the bass, and then just let them be flat. And then just use graphic or just the tone controls on the desk to tweak that. I keep most of my preamps flat above, or especially for 78s, you don't want roll off because they say
33s and 45s doing that, you'd have to wind a fair bit of top out, wouldn't you? Because their frequency response is quite marked in the top end.
Yes, it is. But for 78s and early LPs, it was pre-RIAA standard. And often you can just... the problem is the RIAA EQ curve rolls off too severely for 78s, and they just sound like muffle missions. They sound terrible. So it's better to just open them up and then just do a bit of
or you could even put an external switch where you could switch in the appropriate curve for 45, 33, and then bypass for 78.
Yes, you could. You definitely could. The only thing is that in those packages, the elegance of being able to use jumpers means that all the componentry is on the circuit board, and you haven't got sort of DAG ends hanging out and switches and things which are very susceptible to RF and other problems. And just
cool.
Noise. But look, I found them to be very quiet, really, really good. And I've got about 4 of them installed here, and that's my main amp now. I've got a PKE amp from one of the buyer, but really I have to say...
Well, it got me looking into cartridges and things for my Rager as well. So
good for you.
Interesting, you can, here in Melbourne, there's a place you can actually buy Rager cartridges.
Right.
So they go straight in without having to fiddle around.
Yeah.
Another good option looks to be one of the Autofon range.
Yep.
But apparently the height from the shell mounting to the style eye tip is different on the Ragers.
Okay.
So if you install an Autofon, you have to put little spacers in essentially to pack them up so that you get the same offset between the tone arm and the... That's all. I'll probably start with one of the Rager cartridges. If they're not going to be bad, then I'll investigate further on.
Sure, definitely. I mean, look, the Autofon 5E, 10E, that series they've got a sort of narrow profile cartridge, and they do have quite an escarpment. They are very, very good. They're just excellent for what they are. They're amazing. So it's worth keeping them in mind if the space is an easy option. But
the other one I was reading about too are now in what they're calling a new 2M series, which they produce in a red, blue, bronze, and black.
Right.
And it's from my brief reading last night. They seem to get a very good rap as well.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Another one is the Shure N97 XE. That's what's the M97 cartridge, and the XE is the stylus assembly. It's got a little brush on it, but I find that to be a very neutral cartridge, excellent cartridge.
And you're still able to get them here?
Yes, they're quite easy to procure, and they're not very expensive, but they're good utility cartridge, and so it's worth a look at too. But there's a number in the Shure range. Unfortunately, Stanton used to be great for, especially for sort of DJ type work or the type of work that I do here, of course. And I've got Stanton 500 carts and all the machines here, but they've stopped making them.
No, that's a pity.
It's a real shame.
There also were there were brothers that were based here in Melbourne that used to
the Garrett brothers.
That's right, Garrett. I was trying to remember the name.
Yeah, their
cartridges were of some note, I recall too.
They were very good. Oh, they had a fantastic reputation. They entered a suicide pact, those two brothers. Extraordinary story, and very sad ending. But I think they decided that was, it was a conscious thing. And
what a shame.
Yeah, they lived in Tasmania, and it was. I don't know if they were ill, had terminally ill, or what it was, but it was a terrible shock to the community, audiophile community, when the Garrett brothers both disappeared at once. And but they really cornered the market in that very high end, custom cartridge, custom styling, and you can still get them. In fact, someone else has taken the name. I think it's been sold on.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me, but yeah, I do recall them, being always highly regarded and sought after, and I just couldn't remember the name, but I know. In fact, a friend of mine, I'm sure, had one of their cartridges in his turntable.
Okay.
I always remember that thing sounded pretty good.
Sure. Oh, it's great that you've got around a Planer 5, is it? Planer 3?
Planer 3.
Planer 3, that's right.
It's an 80s, like an 83 model. So the original, kind of run of planers, because they changed from planer, they then changed the name to P3s for a long time, and then they reintroduced the name planer later on. So there are obviously, many different models of them, but
Okay. Yeah, well, that's most excellent. I wish you well with that. It's a
but
good
I do
project.
need to find something that'll play 78s, I think.
Yeah, well, I've just got a garage full of stuff at the moment, so we'll make some arrangements. You can come out here. And, there's all manner of options. And tape machines as well. It's an interesting situation's unfolded today. So
you've been dealing with more of that.
Yeah, I went out there this morning and filled basically filled the Tarago up. And
did you have enough room?
Yeah, I did. And as I expected, quite a lot of stuff had actually disappeared in the interim. So I thought that might happen, but that's okay. It's fine. I mean, I've got no, I'm happy with whatever was there. And I've got a car full and a whole lot of stuff to disperse. So that's all good. Some historic items as well for the museum, but I'm going to have to streamline my collecting acumen, because there's simply not room for every model of everything. But I'll try and keep my interest to Australian stuff, and maybe just a couple of Studers, and then a lot of the other equipment I'll have to let go, I think. But it's been a most interesting morning. And also sorting 78s, there's just tens of thousands. And and I just, the other party is not around at the moment, so he had some other people coming in to sort of assist, but I think they were just totally overwhelmed. And storage of that many records is just, it's completely...
because, judging by the numbers you're talking, you could fill up several garages.
Oh, it's staggering. It's just incredible. Anyhow, I was able to borrow some historic stuff from the stash, and under very, it was all organised, and so which I'll dub off. Quite a lot of 16-inch discs, including some acetates. So quite historic material, radio-related material. So I've taken charge of some of that for dubbing purposes, and we'll return it to the collection in due course. And it's material that really does need to be dubbed urgently, and at least I can sort of offer to do that. And then, of course, it provides me with a bit of missions fodder and some interesting wireless radio anecdotes. So quite a bit of material, including some early ABC stuff, which is quite fascinating on 16-inch acetate. Now, the sad story with the ABC was that in 1973, I think it was, they bulldozed 500,000 acetates into the freeway as road fill for the Newcastle to Sydney freeway.
I wouldn't be surprised by that, because also, as happened later on, they the original 2-inch master records for Countdown in its early days, they got to a point where, the penny pinching, and thought they were just reused tapes. So they released a lot of episodes to be erased and reused.
Wow.
Now, fortunately, I think most of them have been resurrected from other material. I know, because I know someone that came in to do a lot of dubbing for it at one stage and try to keep all that stuff into the digital domain, and so they were able to resurrect, perhaps not all, but most. But they went through periods like that where masters were sacrosanct, you don't touch them, to other times when all of a sudden, cleared, they sat in a holding area for a while, and until such time they were cleared, and then they were made available to be used by any program. You literally picked them up off the clear shelf, put them through the bulk eraser, and laced them up again, ready to record the next show.
Okay, oh gosh, that's a tragedy. Yeah, loss of media is one of the... It's a bit of a cultural cringe situation in Australia, I think. Our track record's pretty bad.
I agree.
And loss of those records of the ABC is just...
Fortunately, I think now that it came... I can't remember when it happened, but there was a point when all of a sudden the decision was made that after... that masters had to be kept, and there was a point in time where they then actually had to go off to the Australian National Archive.
Yes.
in Canberra, and they were then responsible for archiving all the ABC stuff.
Yeah.
So it was kind of taken out of our management's hands, which I think was a good thing.
Maybe. Yeah, well, the unfortunate thing is the National Archives under huge stress at the moment, and they're selling off a lot of their, or giving away a large part of their collection, mainly stuff which has overseas origins. But
they would have digitised it, though, wouldn't they? Surely,
yeah,
they'd have copies.
I think a lot of it would be in the public domain, but it's probably not being properly, researched, and there's probably a lot of very significant stuff that's going to disappear in that lot as well, because it just takes so much time to go through these things. So that's another bit of a sad story, but I'm sure they'd keep things like, the ABC official archive would have its own watermark, and it would have, that's a contained collection. But anyhow, there's a few ABC acetates, 16-inch acetates from the 1940s, and so that'll be interesting to have a listen through to those. Quite a bit of 3KZ, and a number of interesting examples. So we'll get the buyer warmed up and do some dubbing. Yeah, so I've got one on the table now. This is interesting because it says, what does it say on the label? It says TikTok, TikTok Tales. So little radio vignettes, short stories. So I'll put one on. I can give it a play. I was just listening to this one earlier on. Now, is the buyer switched in? I think it is. And I'll use an official original Autophon cartridge from the...
Good evening, Steve.
Hi, Frank. How are you?
Good evening, Frank.
Yay, how are things?
Good evening, Frank. vk3jr, vk3sl, vk3op.
vk3jr. I'm feeling very virtuous. I've been spending the afternoon tidying my...
Very good.
part of the chaos which surrounds me.
Oh, very good. That's excellent. Well, I've been doing exactly the opposite. I've been aggregating and, I've not aggregated, I've been filling up what small spaces I had left.
The encouragement that I get from this is that there's so much chaos that I constantly find things that I'm glad to have back.
Oh, good. Well, that's a nice feeling. Well done. You've been it's very virtuous of you getting involved.
That's one step taken, 1,000 to go.
Yeah, well, we work in small increments. We're just looking at the prospect of shifting all these records today, and it is going to be something like 20 van loads.
20?
It'll be something ridiculous. It'll be some huge number of van loads.
Where are you putting them?
Well, they're not for me.
They're for someone else.
They're going to somebody else, thank goodness. And so they've got storage organised, but it's just so much work, and that I think it's going to be really difficult to see the whole thing through in a short time frame. But I've offered my help to assist in whatever way I can, just to preserve the collection.
Yes.
So we'll see. But it's been a most interesting day, and you may have heard me say I've brought back some acetates, some 16-inch records to dub off, and which will be good missions fodder, and but also it'll at least preserve them in the medium term. And then I'll bring this selection back to the main stash for for the other stakeholders to enjoy. So but I'm very happy not to. I just haven't got room for thousands of 78s, and now it's got to the point where I'd have to have a major glean and reconfigure everything if I was to extend beyond where I'm at the moment, and it would be a huge commitment. Yeah.
The weight to ratio, weight to amount of weight to information ratio is very bad with 78.
It's very bad. It's very bad. One box of records, is 20 to 30 kilograms, about 30 kilograms at least, and you might get half an hour of material out of that, an hour of material maybe.
That's it.
It's not good.
You compare it with a micro SD card.
Yes. In fact, this entire collection would all fit onto a micro SD card,
yes.
Which is so ironic, really, isn't it?
It is.
Yay. And but I suppose it's better for posterity if we have means to sift through the noise, and we have just so much information now. It's hard to sort of label it, contextualize it, and
store it, and the labelling and in a way that's easily accessible is a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. So yes, labelling, just value adding. I mean, this is where the sort of missions and radio programs and Chris's thing and other stuff. Value adding is a wonderful way to sort of rebirth historic material and give it a new life. And long as people keep doing that, I suppose it's current in some form, but it needs to be accessible and found. But see, Australia's record's really quite bad. A lot of our what I think America have had more progressive community copyright laws and things like that, which have allowed material to be sort of quite widely disseminated and shared. Whereas in Australia, it's been pretty much a closed shop, and it's only the likes of collectors like Jamie, of course, and others who've got a good heart, and because our national archives barely release anything, and of course it gets lost to another generation, and then it's very, very hard to find that context and that immediacy. Yeah,
it is. David, one of my sons, is an archivist himself.
Yes.
And he tells me about the difficulties in preserving information and keeping it in a source or on a source which won't itself go out of date.
Yeah, that's right. It's obsolescence upon obsolescence. It becomes a rather a difficult situation. Yeah, well, I'll have to go through this. So when we're here next Friday, when we're doing our Friday missions with Jamie, we'll talk through this batch, and he'll probably have some interesting thoughts about what's what and what the provenance is.
Yeah, great.
And but there's a few things, and I'm thrilled that they allowed me to take them back and dub them off, because that's my favourite approach. In fact, this is sort of one of the reasons I set this booth up in the first place, is to offer a gratis dubbing service for anyone with historic material, so we can do what we're doing.
Copies.
Yeah, keep copies and circulate copies and keep stuff in the public domain. So, there's a series here called Mr. and Mrs. Were you aware of that? It was on 3KZ, and it's with Norman Banks, and it's about 1946, I think. It's pretty early.
Even a bit early for me.
Yeah, it might be a bit of... And it's absolutely bizarre. I'll have to play one later. It's interviewing husbands and wives, or it's mocking up domestic disputes, and then it gets actors to recreate domestic disputes, and then they get the people in the audience to talk about what they would do. But see, stuff like that is socially, it's really interesting, because that is an absolute snapshot of the times. That's the middle Australia from the 1940s talking about their own sort of, manner and their manner of social engagement.
Sounds like an exercise in mental masochism to me.
Yes, I think so. Very much so. But quite bizarre. So, and there's some Aspros, the search for Mr. and Mrs. Middle Australia.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, so we'll sample some of those.
Like, they've just revisited and rehashed that, haven't they, with their whole Australia Talks thing?
Yeah, well,
almost
that's
the same all over again.
It
Exactly,
is. It is. Yeah, reality TV is another birthing of that concept. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How we need to sort of look at ourselves from further afield.
Reality TV's taken it to about 7 levels above that.
Yeah, well, it has. It's so contrived, but I suppose all of it is to some extent. We all want to appear a certain way in our, and be. Yeah, it's an interesting one. The psychology behind it. Yeah.
It certainly is. I think the appeal to the people who are hooked on reality TV is the fact that it does get out of hand. And
yes, that's right. Yes. But to the extent at which it does and really does, I don't know.
True enough.
But who knows? I don't watch it, so I can't comment. But
Same.
Yeah, but I dare say, I think people like something it's got the authentic brand, even if it's not really authentic. It's seemingly authentic, and not too. It's like the interest in really lo-fi and low quality YouTube uploads, people's cat uploads, or people blowing things up or making really messy, documentation of something, and they just go viral.
Yeah.
Whereas a really highly well-produced program will register almost no interest at all.
No good.
it's ironic. So yeah, people look for something that's expedient and in the moment. But I suppose that's a little bit what this is about too. I mean, I favour the whole sort of on the edge, not knowing what's coming next sort of take on things. So maybe I'm a victim of that psychology as well.
I think a bit of expect the unexpected's fine, but it takes on a different colour in reality TV, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does. Well, Franco P, have you done much reality TV as a cameraman? Is he still there?
Not great deals. We produced a couple of programs. No real reality in the sense of like the Big Brothers or any of those sorts of things. Or, I know someone that worked on Big Brother for a while.
Yeah.
And the crew, amongst themselves, the crew called it Big Boredom because it was like 2 12-hour shifts, and they'd go in and the guy I know is actually a radio amateur who's kind of well known. He was just in there as an audio tech.
Oh, really?
Even though he's normally a vision switcher and other things, and so he went in there to basically babysit the radio mics on all these people. So start a shift, he'd go in, change battery packs.
Yes.
And then he said, we'd all be sitting in the control room keeping an eye on it whilst we were Skyping our mates all over the world. That was what it was like because it was typically on the overnight shift.
Yeah, I suppose they just sample big swaths of people's and go and then just pull, because you can do that with digital. You don't. Sky's the limit.
And the other thing, of course, is the funding model that a lot of people don't realise. And it's at one point in time, all of these things were funded by the 1-900 numbers. Go and vote for your who you want on, and of course you consider what the charges on those calls are.
Yeah.
The amount of money they would rake in from the people calling in to vote. That was before any advertising or anything else was done. So,
interesting point.
Big money spinners.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I shot a few things for commercial networks so we were hired, our space and crew were hired to do things on various shows that are pretty what I'd call LCD. And they were hard. You really had to put your brain in a bucket and just go, okay. So they're kind of tough gigs, and you kind of worry about the fact that there's a target audience and that there's a bunch of producers out there that think that these things are worth doing, and because the amount of effort to get a show up. Yeah. So that's the biggest concern to me. There's that, there's a market and there's people that will watch this stuff and gobble it up hook, line and sinker and think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yeah. And what, even a lot of them, I find what disturbs me most about the prevalence of it today is that many of them are predicated on that belittling people and you're not good enough, you're voted off. It's that whole really kind of stripping people down.
Yeah, it's a really negative psychology. It's a character assassination and stuff.
I'm not a fan of it, I've got to say.
No, of course not. That's horrible stuff. Now I can't stand it. I find that whole sort of basically tearing people down approach.
There was a terrible show on once called The Weakest Link, I think.
It's back on, and guess who's hosting it?
Who?
Well, when I tell you, I think you'll be quite surprised, because when I found out she was hosting it, given her background and what's happened to her, I was really surprised.
Yeah?
Magda Zabansky.
No, she's sold out.
It's on air now.
Oh, jeez.
I thought she had a lot of integrity.
I've worked with Magda, and she is, she's a very, very smart lady. And very principled, or at least I thought, but I guess, it gets down to the point in the present climate, what's been going on, got to pay the bills.
You just shattered one of my heroes.
Yeah, have a look. I can't remember what network it's on, but I've run across the odd promo on free-to-air when I'm dialing through on the channels, and there she is doing the whole, you are the weakest link, goodbye stuff, and it's the whole shiny floor show, lots of moving lights, lots of crane moves, high production value, but she's the host.
That's horrible.
That's really sad. Oh, okay. Yes, we just moving. It's the lowest race to the lowest in a way.
Because I was involved, with I shot a fair bit of Kath and Kim with her and the other two, and that was hysterical fun. Yeah,
the hardest
part about that show was trying to keep things steady as you were just breaking up and about to fall over from laughter.
Yeah. He is really talented.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very. I mean, clever writer too. You know, it's a material that she writes, and a very clever woman.
Yeah, she and Jane Turner wrote it, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, and also Jane Turner, but also played Kim. I can't think of her name at the moment, but they're all really talented, very good writers. And, I mean, they're also clever in that they basically owned the concept once they got away from it to Origins. They took control of it all. And so it was even their production company, so they were in charge of their own production, distribution, the whole lot. So they controlled every aspect.
It's interesting. Jane Turner's brother, I used to work with him. He's a school teacher. And he used to tell me they'd workshop a lot. A lot of little family moments were amplified and put into
That must have been very interesting.
Yes.
Gina Riley, that's it. I had to think.
Yeah,
of
that's
it.
right.
Gina's one of those actresses too. That she's just does not care about, you know, how something looks in terms of, you know, how some can be very self-conscious. Not a skerrick of that. Like I remember there were moments where Ted, and the director on it was Ted Emery, and he's a bit of a legend in the industry. He's quite a character. Ted, there's one point we were shooting some stuff in that house in the kitchen, and you know, he was just giving some notes to Gina, and she just at the top of her lungs yelled across. She pulled her pant line down lower to expose, you know, more of a certain region, and then shoved it right into my camera lens and said, "There, is that better, Ted?" And he said, "Yeah, perfect. Right, go with that."
No secret there.
And didn't care if it made the gag 1% or 10% funnier, and it just worked. Whether it made her look, you know, not so great or whatever, it didn't matter. If it worked for the lens, then let's do it.
Wow, that's a great industry story. Thanks for that. Amazing. Did you ever work with Chris Lilly?
A little, not a lot. One of my work colleagues and friends was the main operator on that. Worked with him a lot. Very interesting character.
Also extremely talented.
He used to
very kind of reclusive and
I believe so
too. He'd go off and do a lot of the rehearsal and writing and tweaking on his own. Like the crew would literally be sitting around while he went off to do things. He just had a very different way of working.
Wow. I believe he did a lot of observing. I know people who had association with him, and he'd spend hours and hours just observing people.
Oh, absolutely.
At distance,
that's
and just
the
watch.
art of a lot of that stuff of parody. To the other person who was like that when I sort of first started there in the very early days, and it was interesting walking past his dressing room, and he wasn't, again, he'd leave his door open, and you quite often you'd have a chat to him, but it was Max Gillies with the Gillies Report.
Okay.
I watched him once sitting there watching Bob Hawke interviews and press conferences and stuff, and you could see him studying speech patterns and mannerisms, and just so he could refine his own take on it.
Fantastic! Wow,
that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's faithful reproduction, and then you sort of lampoon it at the same time, but you don't get anywhere unless you get the voice and the mannerisms right.
Yeah, and then yet the other amazing one that I always loved working on, and I still really, you know, mourn his loss, is Clark and Dorr.
Oh, yeah.
Up until, you know, only not too long ago when we used to record those as sort of part of 7:30, and here we are, always in the same suits, sitting there, but ripping off characters purely by the things they were saying and the way they delivered it, not trying to do voice characterisation.
I think that's masterful.
Not relying on makeup effects, just purely due to the word on the page.
He was a national treasure, John Clark.
He certainly was.
And a lovely man, really, really great guy. Really, really miss him. He was just so much fun to work with, and what I loved about it is every week he'd come in and he turned, because we used to chat a lot, because I'm involved with him for a long time over a lot of different shows, and he always had that mischievous gleam in his eye. He'd look at you and go, wait till you hear this one.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah. You heard any of his early Fred Dagg stuff in New Zealand?
Yeah, that stuff, someone's put that stuff up. I think you can find that now.
It's
There's
online.
A fair bit of that's up around
There's
now.
a fair bit of Fred Dagg on
terrific.
YouTube, I think. Maybe we should feature some of it. He's a remarkable individual. I just think he's so gifted, had such a way of, I don't know, connecting with people.
And he and Brian as a team, the writing, that symbiotic, you know, the way they worked, it was quite funny. Like you see them, how they'd come together in the studio. You know, you do one quick dirty rehearsal and then a better one for timing, and then you'd be into it. And they really did bounce off each other very well.
Gosh, how wonderful!
It's a priceless series. I hope they're all available, are they?
Yeah, I think they've released them all as a series. You can buy them.
Oh, excellent!
No, that's good. That's really good to know. Yeah, one of my fave films is Death in Brunswick, with John Clark and what's his name, Sam Neill.
Oh yes,
yeah, it was made in the 80s, but it's got this really earthy sort of, backward culture in Brunswick, which is sort of the student culture that I remember. And
I think one of my favourite John Clark moments was in the games.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you watched it at all, but there was one episode where they're preparing for the games, and there was an issue with the 100-metre track. And John and Brian came in and, ran the thing, and so they got the contractor in, to talk about the building of it, and said, so this 100-metre track, how long is it? And of course the contractor said, about 100 metres. And it just went on, and what it ended up being is that some marketing person had decided that they needed to get a couple of extra rows of seats in the stadium, so they had to reduce the perimeter of the stadium, and therefore that reduced the length of the straight. So it was actually only about 92 or 93 metres, and then the rest of it raced. Actually, if they wanted to run the 100 as strictly 100 length, they'd have to be on the curve a bit.
Right.
And so this information was teased out over a very, very funny sketch, and by the end of it, John's character ended up saying, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, something to the effect of, we can't be the first Olympics to run, the finish of 100 metre on the curve. Can you imagine the world record holder? They'll go around the curve and the centrifugal force will rip their ring off. It'll end up in the back row.
Oh.
Yeah, I saw it. It was amazing. And he was trying to say, well, it doesn't really matter if it's not quite 100 metres. And he didn't get the message across that it actually didn't matter a great deal.
Yeah, it was just a priceless piece of writing, and just the whole, like that whole thing about stupidity and the way, certain forces get in the way of the things that matter, and it was just such a good piece of writing.
That's excellent. I'll look it up. John Clark, the
games, and 100-metre track.
100-metre. There we go. We'll see if it's there. You never know.
I think he co-wrote that with a lawyer called.
Well, Gina was involved in that too. So that was John Clark, Gina Riley, Brian Dorr, and various guests. Yeah,
I didn't know that. I'm trying to think of this guy's name. He's on radio now. Stevenson, he calls himself.
Is it Ross Stevenson?
Yeah.
His name's really Ross Campbell. He's a barrister. He's a solicitor, I should say.
Okay. I think I found it. We'll see if we can see if we can put it on. I think it might be it. We'll take just a little break and have a listen, because I think it's. I'd like to hear it myself. So if we can dial things up under the history file, let's have a listen to the excerpt from the games with John Clark and company. vk3sl testing.
Now, the medals.
Gone?
Bit of a rework.
Ah, brighter colours, perhaps.
Shape needs work.
Round, obviously, being...
Cliche.
Of course.
Now, the Parade of Nations. Greece first, Australia last. Alphabetically, it's all over the shop. Needs work. Anyway, we'll get back to that one. Because there's this one. Yes, this one. Yeah. The traditional release of the doves on their flight of peace. Frankly, I was hoping for something a bit more Australian.
Australian?
Emus, perhaps?
Emus?
Yeah.
Emus don't fly, Jasmine. A walk for peace, sir.
Exactly.
A long-necked waddle for peace.
Lovely.
Yes. Well, can you leave these ideas with us, Jasmine?
Yeah,
because they're substantial and very interesting, and
thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming by.
Good to see you.
Oh, see you again.
Bye now.
Nice seeing you.
Now, Mr. Wilson, we've got a problem, haven't we?
No problemo. That is not good.
No, this is not good at all, Mr. Wilson.
What sort of a problem?
Well, I'm right, aren't I, in assuming that you put that athletics track in?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, now, did you do this to specifications, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, we did.
Are they the specifications there, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, that's them.
Good. Now, Mr. Wilson, have you measured the 100 metres track?
Yes, of course.
Well, let me ask you, how long is it?
How long is the 100 metres track?
Yes.
It's a 100 metres track.
Yeah, I know what it is, Mr. Wilson. I'm asking you how long it is.
It's about 100 metres.
It's about 100 metres long.
Yes.
How long should it be, Mr. Wilson?
That's about the length it should be.
Yeah, about 100 metres long. Is the 200 metres track about 200 metres long?
Well, the 200 metres track is different.
Isn't it twice as long as the 100 metres?
Well, the 200 is different.
No, you've lost us, Mr. Wilson.
Well, the 200 metres track is part of the 400 metres track.
Well, how long's the 400 metres track, Mr. Wilson?
Well, the 400 metres starts round here in the back straight, finishes up here at the finish line. It's a staggered start.
No, familiar with the event itself, Mr. Wilson. What I'm trying to ascertain is, are you absolutely sure that the 200 metres track is 200 metres long?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, because it's half the 400 metres track, which is 400 metres long.
That's right. The 200 metres is half the 400 metres. You can measure it.
Yeah, no. But the 400 metres track is exactly 400 metres long, is it?
That's right.
So the 200 metres track is exactly 200 metres long.
Yes, of course.
But what you're telling me is that the 100 metres track is about 100 metres long.
Slightly different arrangement to the 100 metres track.
Is a metre a slightly different concept, is it, in 100 metres as against 200? Well, I don't understand, Mr. Wilson, quite why in the construction of a 100 metres track you would want to depart too radically from the constraints laid down for us by the conventional calibration of distance.
Well, the 100 metres track is not part of the 400 metres track. It starts...
Okay, there we go. And that was the games, an excerpt from the games. And, yeah, it's...
Yeah, it does continue a bit.
Yeah, I think it goes on, but that's all they give us there. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's all there is on this particular YT excerpt. Maybe it's a teaser. Maybe they're wanting to draw us into the bigger picture.
Probably.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can follow on another time and see if we can find the rest of it. But yeah. So were you involved in the production of that? Frank?
Bits and pieces, yeah.
Wow.
And well, my partner was involved in aspects as well. So.
Oh, very good.
But, it was always good because we were seeing episodes go to air and we'd have a chat to John in the corridor about stuff and.
Okay.
And the great thing, as he always said, because of what was going on at the time, and even, later on in Clark and Dory, he said, but the great thing about all this stuff is he said it just about writes itself.
Yeah, right, okay.
That was what made it so good. It was what was happening.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. They were really just, again, it gets back to what you're talking about, great observers, looking at what was going on, reading between the lines, and then, flushing out the hysterical aspects.
Yeah, that's it. And often just sort of calibrating things 1 degree out of reality, just to the point where you distort reality to that smallest degree. So it's funny without being ridiculous. It's very clever. I think that's where Chris Lilly and people like Ricky Gervais are very gifted in finding that nether region.
I've been called to evening meal, so...
Okay, no worries. Oh, it's good to chat. Thank you. Thanks, Frank, for
Great
coming
to
up.
talk to you both.
Yeah, and I'm sorry we missed you last night. That was it was a pity that we weren't able to get things
more
sorted.
gremlins, I'm afraid.
Yeah, never mind. Yeah, and I'll give you a ring about that other thing as well. And or if anyone's interested, the Audio Engineering Society. I think anyone can go. There's a talk from one of the producers at Abbey Road is giving a chat on Monday. So we'll, if you're particularly interested, just let me know and I can send you a link. I've been told that anyone can participate in this Zoom session.
Yeah, that'll be great, Steve.
Yeah. All right. Good. All right.
I'll go. Cheers, Frank. Cheers, Steve.
Yeah. Cheers, Frank. All the best. Thank you.
JR signing.
Yeah. Fine.
Cheers, Frank. vk3sl.
Yay. All right. We'll oh God, Mike. What's the time? 18:01. Well, I better go and start getting food on the fire set and everything else. But I can play one of these new records that's come along. and you have to save up more industry stories. They're great, Frank. They're really compelling. It's fascinating to hear about.
It's just what comes to mind. When
Yeah,
you're talking about
sure.
certain things is,
That's right. That's good. It's good to hear how it all unfolds at the coalface. I know that a friend of the family's lives very close to here, where we see socially quite a bit. He's a producer on a whole lot of TV. I think he works as an independent, but he does a lot of production work. And I think he did a big program on the AFL recently, and he said that the amount of material used compared to how much is filmed is just staggering.
Ratios of shooting, particularly say for a doco style collecting. The ratios are monstrous. A lot of the more reality or live stuff, it's they're pretty frugal because they know they've got to fill. Particularly when it's produced week to week on a kind of a live or running schedule.
Yeah.
They have to be frugal because otherwise they'll never meet the schedules. But where you're shooting a documentary that's going to be aired, be it 6 months or 2 years down the track, and you're collecting, the methodology is obviously to collect as much as you can, and then really cull it and weed it down to the best, and weave a good story, and that. So. Yeah, the ratios can be very high.
Yeah, indeed. I just the plight of the editor being able to sift through and find sort of kernels of relevant information and provide that scaffolding and that context is something that just bewilders me.
Yeah, a lot of that's done essentially by script editing though, and research prior to.
Okay.
So because
they have tags and they have sort of things they look out for.
And a lot of stuff shot specifically to reinforce particular parts of the script or the storyline.
Yeah.
The same, say, shooting a drama or a feature film where it's all very highly blocked out. I mean, talk about ratios. Like take an American feature film, a Hollywood feature.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking. I mean, as an example, what do you think the amount of completed screen time gets shot in a day, roughly?
I don't know. Minutes?
About 30 seconds.
Oh, shit.
That's about the average. To put things in perspective, I think that the scene in, talking now big blockbuster action films, but Terminator 2, the chase scene with the helicopter and the SWAT van on the freeway.
Sure.
I think they blocked off that entire section of freeway for night shoots for 2 weeks.
Really? For that one scene?
For that scene.
That is just unbelievable. I suppose you've got to factor in rehearsal, multiple takes.
And particularly when you're using weapons and pyro discharges and stuff, the safety aspects and resetting. Like if a take didn't work, you've got to rebuild it all.
Yeah, totally. I can understand. That's absolutely staggering. It's sort of... It changes your perspective.
Yeah, you can see why it cost $480 million to shoot or whatever it was.
Yes, absolutely incredible. We can see why CGI is sort of is rated well because I suppose CGI is probably takes a similar amount of time.
What it's man hours for CGI. The cost ends up getting soaked up in look at the credits, and you look at the number of CGI compositing artists that are working on all these things.
Yes.
It's just a phenomenal number of man hours.
It's astonishing. Have you ever seen those sort of people at work? The way it's sort of
I know one that works over there. He's
okay.
He's been a lead on sort of stuff. He used to work with me at Auntie early days, and he moved across there in the very early, maybe late 80s or very early 90s, and has done a lot of feature film work. And so he's got great stories. And, and he's also a talented artist. Like he does a sort of oil paintings, and he's lately been putting up stuff that he's done of all these sorts of people that he knows and has worked with. And
that's great.
Fabulous artist.
Marvellous. Oh, gosh, it'd be interesting to get insights into how that works as well, because you'd have to have some way of reining in and creating... I mean, I imagine people all have a small part of the composite, and there'd be triages and people would have different
they all
roles.
Do separate bits of it, and depending on what it is.
And then someone's got to aggregate the whole
one
thing.
Of the series he worked on was Star Trek Next Generation.
Right.
As a serial. He's done a lot of feature film work as well.
Yep.
And he said, as an example, a shot of that particular variant of the Enterprise just flying through space. He said from adding the star field to the engine glow to the lights to all of the various bits and pieces for a stock. He said this is just standard couple of seconds, flying across the screen. It was 8 passes, 8 different layers to take it from the model, the raw motion control model shot, to the finished composite.
That is absolutely staggering. That really floors
and
me.
that's frame by frame, 30 frames a second.
Yeah.
You know, it's 2 seconds, so it's 60 frames times 8. So that's,
Yeah, totally incredible. I know those early cartoons, it was just unbelievably labour intensive, and they had hundreds of people drawing those early Disney cartoons, and
all the cell work, and and they were amazing artists because of course they didn't have digital reference points or all
That's
that
right.
stuff, so it was all their eyes and just literally flicking backwards and forwards on those little transparent.
Oh God, what a business! It's interesting. It's quite fascinating when a lot of cartoons in the 60s and 70s went for a much lower quality product, but they often had good scripts and good audio to sort of carry the thing. But the level of detail in later generation cartoons is notably less, specific.
Yeah, there's a really good. I'm trying to remember what it's called now that I saw. Maybe going back, it was during lockdown last year. It was one evening. It might have been on SBS or something like that. There's a really good series of docos on Walt Disney and the whole the founding of the company and building it up, and the big breakthrough was it Fantasia or whatever, the first
the Fantasia
animated film, and how that really set them up, and it looks at the areas that he bought, the old factories, and developed and turned into studios, and the armies of people he had working and the way it worked. It was quite an insight.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to see. I love that film. My kids have all seen it. We've got it here, and it's a great watch. And it's, of course, 7. Well, we can't do that so easily now, but it had 7 audio tracks, I think, which was an incredible achievement.
Very avant-garde for its day.
Yeah, it was really just groundbreaking on so many levels. Now, one thing I must ask you is, do they still have the Foley artist as a part of the...
They do. A lot of the little sound, like back in, when we still had those facilities at work, they had a little booth off the side on the audio mastering suite where they used to master dramas, and they had little trays of gravel and sand and various bits and pieces in there, and they would do post-sync and bits and pieces. But because the place is not really doing drama anymore, they've dropped all that stuff. Once upon a time it was very quite a lot of it was being done.
You can really evaluate so much.
In training we were taken around and they showed us a bit of stuff, and they worked it through, and they said, okay, well, here's how we generate a sound for this, and they'd show you and record it, and then you take you to the desk and go, now we do this and this and this to it. And so it's still certainly very big, and you'll see the credit, and on features it's very much it comes more under the banner of sound design these days, and the guys, particularly with a lot of the sound effects, it's how it's not only that side of it, but it's then the remarkable process they go through of thinking about how to arrive at a final sound, or they conceive of something and then they try to work backwards on how to build it from some random sound of something.
Yeah, fair enough. That's right. Well, you have to have a real imagination for correlating different sort of expressions, of course, and also having something that's sort of larger than life, or gives immediacy to a particular sound, like jingle of keys or opening up a lock or something. It's often very sort of omnipresent. You get that close up. If we get a close up, you get a close up sound as well.
Yeah, sound perspective. That's a big one. That even miking. That's the other thing about, say, as an example, the American feature movie industry, and probably their higher end feature television production too. Yeah, is that all of their dialogue predominantly is post-sync ADR, whereas we here predominantly shoot live sound.
That's interesting.
And that came up on a... I did a Steadicam masterclass in Sydney with Garrett Brown, who's the guy that invented the Steadicam.
Wow.
And he brought along some record tapes that the guys the operators in the States used to run little DV recorders, particularly here, and record the video split, and have a little microphone on the rig. So as they were doing a rehearsal, rather than having to roll all the time, they could just record locally.
Okay.
And it meant that after a rehearsal, they could play back and they could look at where the problems were and sort out a lot of stuff like that before they ever went for a take.
Okay.
Which was a great way to work, very economical. And he particularly brought along a bunch of things from an operator called Larry McConkey, who did that great shot in Goodfellas, going through the restaurant with all the tables and stuff.
Oh, yes.
And the opening shot of Bonfire of the Vanities. And extraordinary operator. And he worked with Brian De Palma a lot, and Brian trusted him to choreograph all the Steadicam stuff. And he showed us one particular scene that Larry had shot, and it was Carlito's Way, Al Pacino.
Mm.
And it was that last sort of that scene of culmination in the underground railway station with all the escalators and stuff, and it was a running gun battle between Pacino and someone else. And
Okay.
and he showed us how he constructed that and the methodology used. But one thing that struck me straight away was that Larry was yelling out cues to Pacino to say do a lot of matched moves where, for instance, Pacino would pop out from around, you know, a pillar looking, and he'd push the Steadicam out and turn at the same time. So you had that mirror movement, you know, and that had to be really well timed.
Exactly.
So Larry would just yell cues.
Oh, and you just expunge them from their final.
And of course later they just do ADR post dialogue and fix it all in post.
How incredible!
And it was a really great insight into a way of working.
Yes.
But when we finished looking at all that, I straight away sort of said to Garrett, "I'd really appreciate it, Garrett, but I said we can't do that here. I'd be killed if I did that." He said, "Why is that?" I said, "Well, we record live sound. If I yell out in the middle of a take, the boom operator will hit me over the head with the pole."
Yes, of course. So how about that? It's a completely different approach to production, isn't it? Really?
That's just, you know, so they, but
it's very labour intensive.
God. Oh yeah. So imagine all the actors are coming into the studio afterwards.
And
having
syncing
to lay
up.
Down all their audio again, essentially, you know, on a mic with cans on, watching the footage back, syncing to themselves.
Oh, it just biggest disbelief. But of course, a lot of that happens. What used to happen with multi-language films, it was a standard process for when you distribute films in different countries. But that's intriguing. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. That's really quite an insight. Yeah, much appreciated. All right, well, what I'll do is I'll just play a little segment, then I'll probably should head inside and make sure the house is not destroyed.
I must investigate dinner things as well.
Yeah, so I've got here a 16-inch vinyl pressing. It's an AWA recording from, 50s, I'd say. It's a radio short called TikTok Tales. So I'll pop one of these on for a little bit, and for a bit of filler, maybe a little bit of music to finish, and hopefully we'll be back tomorrow. And I'm hoping I have a good story about the Studer. I really want to get this going. It's an absolutely amazing machine. But, it's not doing what it should yet. Fingers crossed. All right, now, is this a centre start or is it a outside start? Can't remember. Well, I'll put the needle in and see if we have success. This is vk3sl testing.
Hear that clock ticking? Come with me for 4 minutes on a railway journey with A Man to Remember. As the express roared through the night, the passengers would have been horrified had they known that in one carriage, murder was being committed.
And I am the murderer. My victim is sitting opposite me now, quite unsuspecting. You all know him, Chief Inspector Mowbray, Scotland Yard. He cleaned up the big dope smuggling ring some months ago and put me out of business. It's not nice being put out of business, particularly when you're the boss. No, he didn't get me, but I'm going to get him. Why doesn't he recognize me? My own mother wouldn't recognize me. It's this scar, right across the left side of my face. It's not a real scar, of course, but a very effective disguise. Let's try it out on the inspector. Excuse me, Inspector. It is Inspector Mowbray, isn't it?
That's right. Why?
Oh, I wanted to be sure I didn't kill the wrong man.
Kill the wrong... What are you doing?
Well, that was easy, wasn't it? But then it's always easy to kill a man when he's not expecting it. Handy little thing, this knife of mine. No murderer should be without one. Aren't I afraid of being caught? Not at all. I planned it too well. Let's check back on my movements. There was the man in the ticket office.
Where to, sir?
What are you staring at?
Nothing. It was just...
My scar, eh? I'm used to it now. Give me a first single to London and forget the scar. He won't forget the scar, of course. I don't want him to. Now let me see. The ticket collector at the barrier. Quite surprised when I pushed him aside and rushed for the train.
Yeah, Mano, you're pushing. And where's your ticket?
Right under your nose, you fool. Get out of my way. I've got to catch that train.
Well, all right, then. No need to be so rude about it.
Shut up and let me through. Yes, he'll remember me. People always remember you if you're rude to them. Did he get a good look at my face? Oh, yes. I made sure of that before I pushed him aside the second time. How did I know the inspector was traveling, and which carriage he was in, and whether he would be alone? Did anyone see me get into the carriage with him? Really, you're too inquisitive. After all, I did plan this murder, didn't I? Of course I was seen getting into the carriage with him. There were a couple of friends seeing him off. Can you tell me if this carriage goes through to London?
Yes, you're right.
Thanks.
Did you see that chap's face? What a ghastly scar.
Looks like the victim of a razor gang.
Poor devil. And that brings us up to date. You must agree, I'm a man to remember. Only one more hurdle now, the terminus. I shall have to move fast there. Can't have them finding the body before I get through the barrier. But a man in a hurry always attracts attention. More so if he has a scar like mine. Of course I won't have the scar once I'm through the barrier. At least not for long. A little cold cream, soap and water, and I'll be my own debonair self again. Whilst the whole country seeks a murderer with a scar on his face. A murderer that many will have seen, but nobody will be able to find. Quite neat, don't you think? And now, if you don't mind, I think I'll have a little snooze until we get to the terminus. I don't think the inspector will disturb me. The terminus. It's good to be out of the carriage. One gets so stiff. Some people get bored to death. Dear me, policemen at the barrier. But of course, to meet the inspector. Well, well, so much the better. I do hope they get a good look at my scar. Seems they're going to. Such a nuisance.
Excuse me. We want a word with you, I think.
What do you mean, you think?
There's been an accident, and you look like the man they described on the phone.
An accident? What accident? Look here, I'm in a hurry.
You're the man, all right. Couldn't be mistaken. Not with that scar. The ticket collector you pushed over rushing for that train. He hit his head rather badly. You'll have to come along with us.
Seems I rather overdid things, doesn't it? They haven't discovered the body yet. Oh, so sorry. They have.
Well, there's a man to remember. Quite a letdown for a master of makeup. Be back soon with another story that's different. May I have your attention? Thank you. You've been listening to Tick-Tock Tales, a John Craig radio show.
This is vk3sl, and we're sampling some interesting radio nostalgia, courtesy of a collection that I'm involved with at the moment, and these will be dubbed off in due course and hopefully preserved, which would be great. Now, there are others here as well, and we'll follow on with some more examples during the week. Okay, it's like such a manual experience using this via turntable. It's like putting the car into gear. All right, well, we'll see what else we can find to ride out for the next little while I go and check in at the home front. And what do we have in the vault? Yeah. I better go and have a look. I'm going to head up to the top shelf, I think. I can take the mic with me. We'll check in. Let's see, there's quite a lot of vinyl here that hasn't been played. We'll reach up. Palette of Many Colours. What is this? It's a 10-inch record? I think I have played this before, but don't tell anyone. It's a radiola disc from the 1950s. I reckon this will sound very nice on the maybe. Yeah, it should sound quite good on the buyer. So I reckon we'll do another Biomagic. Palette of Many Colours, and it's just it's a sample record. It's one of these discs where they provide you with, let's see, yes, different ensembles extolling their virtues and theoretically and advertising for AWA, but of course we don't advertise on these missions. Alright, I won't go through the list of artists, there's quite a few here, but it's one of these early radiola flip records, and it features music of continental interest and a few jazz tracks as well. Alright, and the first one is Bella Sanders and his orchestra in Tender Rhythm, it says. Alright, we'll put part one on. It's a 10-inch record. Put the buyer back into gear. And we'll listen to both sides of this 10-inch disc, and then we'll follow on with our usual wind-up for today. Thank you for your indulgence. This is vk3sl. We've been testing here on 160 and on UHF. And we are ready to go. This is vk3sl. These are test missions on 160 and on UHF. And also streaming online, we're just playing some test material, tone tests involving the music of a variety of artists issued on the Radiola label in the 1950s. So we'll turn the record over and have a listen to the other side. We'll hear Bella Sanders and his orchestra with Jealousy, followed by Hans Arno Simon and his cocktail piano with Rhythm Group, followed by Max Gregor and the Telefunken Dance Orchestra. And then Bella Sanders again. We heard Bella Sanders, we've heard him a couple of times. And finally, Max Gregor and the Telefunken Dance Orchestra with a rumba potpourri. There we go. Sounds of the 50s using authentic equipment. This is vk3sl. Whoops. In the groove.